they didn't have video games back then. So what else are you gonna
That's
do?
true.
Hop in the flesh pile, you know? Well, yeah, I made a really good decision last night. So we went to a burlesque show, which was awesome. We have a good troupe in the area, but I was screaming, in general, just like woo and all those things. And then I realized I'm like, oh right, I'm gonna be recording in the morning, so maybe I probably shouldn't blow my voice the full way out. But yeah, I think my voice exists. So,
A little bit of raspiness never hurt.
well, yeah. So what's or just like descend entirely into vocal fry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a project manager at work she is fully vocal fry all the time, and it's one of those things where I think I saw an article online about it with someone complaining, and I never would have thought about it, but it's one of those things where it's like they set the top spinning in Inception. I'm like, well, I can never get rid of that thought now that some people just hate vocal fry for just because. I'm just like,
I think it's like a generational problem. It's not like one of those real things. It's like millennials are killing Applebee's kind of problem. I don't think that like sane people actually have that problem.
Well, it's like, when you've got a brain that's an intrusive thought machine and someone introduces a new one, I'm just like, oh, fucking, that's cool. I get to live with that now. Thank you. Also, millennials are definitely not killing Applebee's. One of my friends, I mean, they've got the cheap alcohol, so she goes. Actually, maybe that's why they're killing it. It's like endless shrimp.
No, the profit margin on the martinis is very low. You need to buy like something else, some food.
Oh my gosh. So you said what are you up to?
I went to the local Christmas market.
Oh.
Because it's the middle of October.
Yeah.
So
I've played City Skylines. I'm aware of winter markets.
Well, all of the like little villages around here all have to have like Christmas markets, but they all compete for the weekends, so everyone just keeps, there's always one every weekend somewhere.
Yeah.
So like they just keep pushing them forward, and I think they've kind of settled, so like there aren't any, but for a while there it seemed like it was getting earlier every year. But it was a lovely autumnal day with crispy leaves on the ground, a cool breeze in the air, not too many people. Very nice.
A little bit of so like you've got like Christmas market creep basically. A little bit of it.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We did go to the Ren Fair last weekend. I think I got the authentic experience of just sweating horribly because I decided to do like a closet cosplay of Alan Wake because it was Time Traveler weekend, which meant I was wearing a wool suit and it was not in the 60s. So, I mean, tropical Sweden had prepared me for that, so it wasn't like it was anything new. But I feel like I did the genuine thing. I got the actual experience of being hot at a Ren Fair. I think that's like critical. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Last time I went to a Ren Fair, it was a pretty different vibe than I remember from when I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
A lot more juggalos and vaping than I remember, but this was also like outside Detroit, so
okay. Yeah, I didn't actually see I didn't even see a vape now that I think about it. I mean, maybe.
Wow.
I just don't recall seeing
Classy
anyone ripping cotton. Yeah.
Well,
Well, it felt a little bit like when we first got there. It felt a little Disney World because it felt like more people were there not dressed up than were.
Right.
Which it's as the day went on and as we like went deeper into the space, we saw more people doing dress up and things like that. So it was pretty cool. It was a lot, but I think I'd probably do that again. That was my very first Ren Fair experience, which Renaissance is not spelled with two N's. I don't know why my brain keeps thinking that, but yeah.
No, that's always how I've abbreviated Renaissance for some reason too.
Yeah.
I don't know why I do it.
I looked at them. I'm like, oh, I'm like super wrong. I'm like, what? No one.
Well, it's like fridge. None of those letters are actually in refrigerator.
Right. Even Frigidaire, it doesn't have them in that order. We just bastardize the hell out of it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was always terrified of being misinterpreted as being someone who was trying to participate in the Ren Fair as opposed to a tourist. Because one time when I was a kid, I got accosted by a guy, like one of the guys working there, and I asked him where the bathroom was, and he, in pure pseudo Middle English, had to like explain to me where I needed to go to the bathroom, and I was terrified of ever interacting with anyone in a roleplay context ever again.
Yeah, okay, that's fair, and yeah, I definitely didn't see much of. There wasn't much of that, which is probably a good thing, frankly. But yeah, enormous turkey leg, very greasy
funny.
turkey leg. But I mean, that's Greece's flavor, right? I think so.
Yeah,
Totally.
That's how it works.
So I did happen to notice, not to veer us to the topic of what we're going to talk about, but I did happen to notice that it seemed like on the 10th you were, in fact, 2 days ago, starting to accumulate achievements in this game. So I'm glad to see that you got a head start on it.
Well, I got to keep it fresh in my brain. I don't want to let it get stale.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Playing it. So I guess we could talk about that. Anyway, so welcome to the Save State. This is a podcast where we talk about video games. I'm joined by my co-host and cousin Dennis.
Hello.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
And today we're playing, or we played. We're not playing anything at the moment. Fashion Police Squad, which it took me several hours of play before I realized that it also stands for first-person
FPS.
Shooter, FPS.
Yeah. I did enjoy that one. I don't remember if it was like right in the beginning, but I was like, oh yeah, this is good. This is very good. And yeah, so I have to say I don't really play a lot of I guess we're calling this a boomer shooter. I mean it's effectively like very much plays like Doom, obviously.
Yeah.
Do you play much like this? What's your like first impression with going through this game?
Yeah, so this is like I said, this is a boomer shooter. It's in the style of like you don't shoot things in the sense that you shoot things with guns. You shoot things with fashion, which we'll get to in a minute. So, but yeah, I played a few. So the one I played most recently was probably the Warhammer bolt gun, which is a lot more in. Like I think with boomer shooters you have two different types. You have the ones that are like more literal reinventions of or like resurrections of the genre. It's like this is just like the Dooms of the old days. And then you have ones that kind of borrow some of the aesthetics or borrow some of the mechanics, but in the end actually aren't that similar to the old boomer shooters. And this one I think kind of did a little bit of both. It had a lot of modern concepts that you have in first person shooter games, like grappling hooks and that kind of mechanic, but the level design and the enemy types and the objectives were very similar to an older style one. So I kind of think it did a little bit of both.
Yeah, I have to. I thinking about it now, with you just mentioning kind of like the delineation between the two, like it did occur to me like this feels kind of like quote unquote a Doom clone, which FPS in general. But I really started to get it. I had played one of the more recent Dooms, just so I was like, I want to get into a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me at some point here, once I started unlocking the different weapons, I'm like, I'm entering the gameplay loop now, where I'm like,
exactly.
you got to use this particular fashion weapon for this particular enemy in this way, and I worried because I don't play a lot of these. And I was like. I think I did write down, I'm concerned that I'm going to start, like, having this get away from me, just because I'm, like, as someone who doesn't play a lot of these, I was a little concerned with that. I did get through most of the game without dying, playing on normal difficulty. I didn't go for tiny baby mode, which is fine. I shouldn't even call it tiny baby mode. Difficulty is a choice, so you can do whatever you want. But
boomer shooters are the ones that will judge you of the game genres. They're usually the ones that are like they invented that fair. Kind of nomenclature.
But yeah, it definitely felt like I don't know, somewhere between like Doom and Quake, just in terms of like the actual movement and how you can interact with the space.
Yeah, I thought it reminded me. It was like kind of. I think the level design was very Duke Nukem-y actually, like Duke Nukem 3D, with like the kind of more like. It feels like it's open, but it really isn't. Stuff with like the way, and also where like the secrets are hidden in the way they did that. But like the actual mechanics remind me a lot of the more modern Dooms, like you said, where you have specific weapons and enemy types. Although this game doesn't get nearly as complex as the newer Dooms. Like, it is a much more limited
Yes.
selection of weapons and enemy types and levels. In fact, that is, if I were to like say I had a complaint about this game, it was that this almost felt like a demo for a bigger game in some ways. Where
It definitely was not that long of a title, yeah.
yeah, it was pretty short, and and I was kind of expecting there to continue to be more like weapon types and more enemy types, and it kind of felt like it dried up a bit. But at the same time, I prefer games that know when to get out versus like ones that kind of drag things along. That was one of my problems
Prolonging
with Bolt Gun.
the magic.
Yeah, like with Bolt Gun, they kind of stretched stuff out, and like you ended up with like long levels that didn't really add anything to the game. They just were more of the same. So I think I'd rather have a game, like I said, that knows when it's sold its piece. No, I was just saying, one thing I read about in other reviews was that it seems like a lot of people had some trouble with the bosses. Like, there was a pretty big spike in difficulty with some of the bosses. I didn't really have that problem. I mean, I don't think the bosses were easy, but I felt like they were on par with the rest of the game.
Well, so the first fight, I mean, I also just one of the things to call out about this game, I think is hilarious, is just, and I wish I knew more about fashion, because I'm pretty sure, like,
Yeah.
I know the brands, like the takeoffs of brands like Hugo Boss being spelled, or BAUSS, and it took me until Mission 2 to realize that when they said Gucci, they meant like Gucci but spelled sideways.
Yeah.
So that was
Me too.
fun. It's interesting that you mentioned about the bosses, because I did not really have an issue with them until I got to the final boss, and I think some of that was just, I don't know if that like ramped up there, or if I was just kind of playing it wrong and focusing more on the boss rather than on the moves that are being telegraphed by them.
Yeah.
I don't think I died on any of the other boss fights, and everything seemed pretty straightforward as far as the game does tell you, like, hey, if you're trying to do this damage type on enemy that's immune to it, if you do it enough, your partner calls in, like, hey, maybe use the belt or something. So yeah, I had more issues with the larger mobs of enemies, especially towards the end of the game, like the ski slope area. I got my shit wrecked a bunch of times there. So that was and I think that they're encouraging you to pull out the big fashionable gun and just blow up the mobs, or use your badass Fab Slap glove to slap some fashion sense into everyone. But yeah, some of them I would kind of get like, I wouldn't know which enemy to take out first, and that was usually what kind of screwed me up, and mainly it was this. I just have to say I hate the guys on scooters so much. I mean, just from the gameplay perspective, but also for what they represent in real life. I hate those scooters. I want to throw those things into the lake. I call them lake food. I just So yeah, that's my personal hang-ups with the neon wearing scooter guys riding at you on cell phones.
Yeah. Well, I think also, like you mentioned, like the rooms, like that was one thing I felt like with the newer Doom games, which tend to do that, is that it always felt like it always felt almost like puzzles, where you're like, okay, I need to take this one out, and then use this gun for this one, and then charge up with this one. It felt like an intentional sequence where, because like they're using like a much more complex mechanic in a much more simplified format, like of the boomer shooter, it kind of didn't allow for a lot of that more complex thinking, because like my movement options were much more limited than they would be in a newer Doom game. The level layouts were much more limited than what they'd be in the newer Doom games. So even though I'm supposed to think like, oh, I need this weapon to take out this enemy, I'm mostly still just doing like, jump and strafe like I would be doing in Doom or Quake or something like that.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that was one of the other things I again, having not played too much of the boomer shooters, I had to figure out like what are the movement patterns that this game expects me to play with. So I was thinking about like jump and strafe, and it's interesting that you mentioned that as well. And I just kind of hammer in why I think that you and I are both comparing it to a modern Doom is, I mean, it clearly makes reference to a lot of like the gameplay loop. I just as kind of a sidebar, I don't know if you noticed the elevator music is basically just is it S1E1 from the original Doom, like it's just that, but just samba.
Yeah, but with like the
in a major key.
Yeah, exactly.
That was I really enjoy, like, there are a lot of references in this game to a lot of other games, and it's a lot of fun. I don't want to like spoil all of them, but just the little things all over all over the place where really, really entertaining. So that was a sidebar. Now I forget what we were talking about. So
No. I mean, that's a good point. Like, this game has a lot of really like cool art decisions. Like it does like the whole like I guess we should like the premise of the game is that you are a
oh yeah,
member
we should
of the
probably
fashion police.
yeah, a member. You're Dez, a member of the fashion police squad.
Yeah, you're supposed to go around and instead of killing demons, you're fixing fashion disasters, which is like men in ill-fitting suits and people with their like, well, just bad coloring. It's not too judgmental, generally speaking, but it's kind of trying to, you don't kill people. You like after the end of each level, instead of there being like a death count, you get like a fashion runway show of all the people whose clothing you've
at the parole
renovated.
ball, I think it was.
The parole ball,
yeah.
So all the weapons are like related to that. So you have like a sewing machine gun and like a dye
tailor-made
gun, and yeah, exactly, yeah, and gnome grenades that
not
eat
underpant
socks.
gnomes, sock gnomes that eat the socks of German tourists because they're wearing them with sandals.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's very it's not meant to be very serious, and it has like this like color palette to the level, which I really was enjoying, or the levels. I don't know, to me it reminded me of like Sega games from like the Dreamcast era, maybe like some of the arcade stuff. I'm thinking like Crazy Taxi, or maybe even like some of the later Outruns, just like a lot of really bright blue skies,
very vibrant. Yeah,
just a really like that's something you never see in boomer shooters is like color. I mean,
no.
unless it's like grotesque amounts of color.
Yeah, this felt like a kind of a subversion of the tropes of this typical of this sort of game. No grim dark. It's happy bright. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there was even some parts of the levels where I kind of felt like it could have been like even like a Tony Hawk level. You know what I mean?
Oh, especially at one point, yeah. Towards the very end of the game, you're right. There's definitely so I'm interested, but prior to that, expand on that a little bit. I'm curious about that actually. What's your take on that, or what's?
Why do I think? Well, it's like I think it's like the way they kind of have these open, like in a lot of boomer shooters, you have corridors and big rooms where there's lots of enemies, and it felt like the way they laid them out was like a lot like in a skater game where you're going through like a room, but then like the hallways weren't just hallways to other rooms. They kind of felt like you were supposed to interact with them in certain ways, and maybe it was just the mechanic of having that whip thing or trying to jump around a bit more, and like they're also their insistence on using like city architecture as like interactable stuff, like not interactable in the sense that you could like click on them and things happen, but like you were you had to be aware of like potted plants and patio furniture and stuff like that, where I felt like I was thinking about like a cityscape like I would be in a Tony Hawk game, maybe.
No, that makes sense.
Even if it would just be like barrels or something in a normal boomer shooter.
Yeah, and I will say I did appreciate that this did not really do the whole modern game thing, which is now this is like probably a 10-year-old trope at this point, but time marches on. But looking for yellow paint to figure out how to navigate to the next zone.
Yeah.
Like, there were some things like some of the secret areas, they're illuminated and things like that, but they don't make it super obvious. They don't beat you over the head with it. Except for one point in the game, I never really had much of an issue looking around and figuring out what I needed to do to get to the next area. I did have one point towards the when you're trying to get to the the sniper's nest for the first fashion show. There was a path that looked obvious to me, and you mentioned the city infrastructure. I was like, okay, I can just use the soapy water gun, jump across this, and then there's a transformer box, but I kept missing it. And eventually, I think the game just gave it to me and just set like I don't know if I hit like the checkpoint bounding box or whatever, but then I was really frustrated. Like, okay, no, I did this wrong. I need to figure out how. And eventually, I figured out you're supposed to basically like backtrack, hop up a building, grab a piece of what do they call it? It's swag is your armor, like either a bow tie or like a Kuji belt. Well, you probably already have a Kuji belt. I don't know. But they didn't have Rolex watches, so it's like Zlor or something probably. I don't know. I didn't see any brand names for that. But that was the only moment in the game where I really kind of got a little frustrated with the movement. Well, I also will say that when you first get, let's see, there's the drip mode. The gun's called Wet Ones, but it's got a little apostrophe in it, so I don't. I feel like I'm missing a reference there.
Yeah.
The soap gun,
I mean,
but
it's like cold ones is what maybe I was thinking, but obviously that's not
maybe,
it.
yeah. I feel like there's probably like it's yeah. Well, anyway, you look up Wet Ones, and it's like it's antibacterial wipe, so that's clearly not it.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was a very slim margin of error for when you had to jump with that. Like you couldn't take it like a couple feet too early. You basically had to. To me, it felt like you had to jump off of something at the last possible second, which I did eventually get, and I even tried one of the challenge levels that relies on you navigating like that, and it was okay, but that was the only time that the movement I kind of found was a little frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it doesn't try and like make the movement too much of a barrier. Like it kind of feels like the movement, and also like they don't really, which is I guess probably a good thing. They don't really make you do a lot of movement, tech, and combat at the same time. Like they generally break it up. So like you have an area that is a shooty bad guy area, and then you have an area that is a movement tech
Oh
area.
yeah, you're definitely not like platforming and trying to wipe out mobs. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a little difficult probably for me.
Yeah, especially in this kind of game. But like you mentioned, like we were talking, you mentioned like the whole yellow paint phenomena, and I think like that is one thing that this like boomer shooters have in general, but like especially like when you have very clear art style, you can draw the eye to into places without it having to be as intrusive as yellow paint,
Mm,
because like I think the yellow paint comes from lazy level design, or at least unintuitive level design, where you're trying to make things more like real life as opposed to like a video game level.
yeah,
Like if I'm playing a video game, I know generally where I need to go, but in real life, like I don't know what's behind that tree or over that hill. Like that's not part of where I experience things. It's not an important thing to me. But a video game expects you to kind of explore a real place like a video game level, and that's why you have to have yellow paint, because you need to have, it's like why you have signs for restaurants and shit, because like
right,
otherwise it's just a building I'm driving by.
yeah,
But like in this game they didn't have to do that, obviously, because they have like a art style and a level design that like indicates where you need to go and what you need to do.
yeah.
That was never a question really in this game.
Then it is a fairly it's a fairly straightforward space that you deal in, and there are waypoints as well that tell you like the general area that you go to, which it feels right for this genre. I think of some other games where I find it very frustrating not to veer off too much onto this topic, but I went back a couple months back and played the first Alan Wake game, and
Mm-hmm.
that one has like some real like Xbox 360 game design. Like there is a mini map and it does tell you where to go just by pointing like a little compass, and that in a game like that it's something that will take you completely out of the space because you're not engaging with what's on the screen versus something like this where it is on the screen. Your UE is pretty much limited to how many shots do you have in your paintball gun to undrab the gray suits. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate everything felt very genre appropriate, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
with this particular title.
Yeah, it all felt very considered. Like the everything down to the UI felt like it was all part of the same setting. Like there wasn't like this. There was no disconnect toward anything really. Like it all felt like this kind of slick, like hip,
Mm.
hip, slick
Fab.
young people. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, speaking of other ejaculations along those lines, that's what they're called, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, that's what they say in Sherlock Holmes, at least.
yeah. Holmes ejaculated. Yeah. So what I really enjoyed. I, I like it when you have a game where with the enemies, or not the enemies, with the fashion criminals, when you solve their fashion crimes either through slapping them with a belt to tighten up their dress that is a potato sack, or hitting them with the paintball gun so that their gray suit looks fabulous. There is someone who yells something that's just like fab, suave, and I really enjoyed that for how many times you would hear those phrases. It really didn't seem to repeat very often. I never
No,
got
that's a good
tired of
point.
it, which was awesome because nothing drives me more crazy. And this is why I love Supergiant games so much, but nothing drives me more crazy than when you hear the same voice line multiple times in not only just a playthrough, even a session. So, it's like with this game, like I just said, with Supergiant games where there are voice lines that you will maybe never hear repeated. I really appreciate that, and it feels like there's probably not that much. You just have to have someone who's designing the game that's important to them, and they just take the extra time for the recording or setting that thing up. But yeah, that was good. I really that's where I feel like there's a lot of love and care that went into this title.
Well, that's a good point, because that was probably more necessary for this game than most, because when you do, fix a fashion crime, they don't just drop over dead. They stand there and kind of dance around in happiness. So, like, it is kind of like an important way of indicating to the player, like, you've killed this enemy, because they didn't explode in a ball of gore.
Right.
So, like, how that's how I'm trained to know. Like, how do I know that I don't need to keep shooting them?
Yeah, they didn't detonate into gibs.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to kind of you have to have that voice line to tell you that, like, okay, and that's another thing that's fun, is because, like, a lot of times you'll have levels that loop back into old previous areas, and then you'll get ambushed by more enemies, and you kind of end up with these rooms that are just full of people dancing. Cause,
you're in a subway station with electrified rails, and people are just having an absolute rave.
Yeah, exactly.
I really enjoy the particular enemies with the bowling shirts with flames on them. The Guy Fieri's, I guess, perhaps. Their little dance once you fix their fashion crime is totally worth how frustrating they are, I think.
Yeah. No, it's a very fun little game. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, no, this was. I did start to get. I think I kind of got a little exhausted with it right at right in the last couple levels, right before the final boss. But I also am keeping in mind the fact that I was playing this game to finish the game at that point, so it changes your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you do any of the challenges or side missions?
I did the first two, and then I was like, well, I kind of got to get going with this game. And then
Gotcha.
I don't think I finished the second one. I think I only finished the first one.
Okay, I did the third one, and it was like I think I mentioned, it was basically like a platformer based in cyberspace with that particular converted fashion criminal boss. And it was reasonable. It was fun. I'm not really selling it with my tone, but
yeah, no.
It's definitely one of those things where once you get the mechanics of it, I think going back and seeing how fast you could do it would be a lot of fun. But no, I didn't even touch the first two side missions. What was the deal with those? Or do you recall?
One of them was like very whip the
belt of justice,
the grappling hook whip mechanic, where you swing around things, and then the other one was I forgot what the other one was. I only dipped into it, and then I was like, okay, well,
gotcha.
I'll have to keep going. But the other one, it was like one of those, like, not time trial, but kind of felt like a time trial kind of a thing with the swing mechanic. But
gotcha. Yeah, I started to. Trying to think. Yeah, I think by mission 4, that's when I started to really kind of get the navigation, because I was kind of unclear if it was actually like physically based. Because you are basically, when you whip like a flagpole, and you'll spin around it, and then you can jump off of it, and then grapple to the next one. And I was really kind of unclear. It's like, all right, does this actually have grounding in physics, or is it kind of just? So it started to make more sense on that 4th mission. Yeah, exactly. That's where I was like. I will say that. I think this game's totally worth playing for the last missions, especially for when you're on the ski slope. The only thing they fear is you, with Christmas music. Basically, that was.
There's some good sound design on this game.
Mm-hmm. I also I had a very good time after the second boss runway with the music and I won't spoil it, but that was just incredible. The references in this game and the way they accomplish a lot of it, it's a lot of fun. It's a very good game.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing was, I was thinking about this because I have like nieces and nephews and stuff. Like, I think that this is totally a boomer shooter that you could have play with kids.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This isn't a genre that's usually very like child friendly. Like, there's usually a lot of blood and gore and stuff. But like, this is just sunny skies and fixing people's ugly clothes.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a good time.
Yeah, I definitely, for sure. I didn't consider that angle. I will say the one thing that kind of threw me off was the Karen enemies. Not realizing that it was pepper spray at first, I was kind of I was like, what is this game doing right now? And what is this saying? And even if it is pepper spray, I'm still a little like, So that was one of the things that kind of that was the only thing that really kind of took me aback a little bit. And I guess if you're also a German tourist who wears the hat and socks and sandals, you might have some opinions about it. But
Yeah, I feel like even fashion's starting to come around on the Birkenstock and socks thing. As long as you wear it with the right, as long as you wear your fanny pack on your chest and the right tracksuit, I think you could get away with it.
That's it's not what you wear; it's how you wear it, right? So
exactly.
But yeah, I think that I wrote down that's about everything I wrote down about this. I don't know if there's anything else that you thought was kind of. I did write down I really, really hate the scooter guys, and I probably need to focus on the mobility weapon, but in all caps, fuck. So.
Yeah, no, yeah, that especially when you end, like, they like to put them, because the scooter guys like have this knockback ability, and they like to put them right on like around corners near ledges, so they can just, I mean, and falling off a ledge isn't that big of a deal, like it just brings you back, like, but it is very frustrating. It feels more demoralizing than actual, punishing.
yeah, definitely. I will mention, now that I'm thinking about it, you mentioned this might be for kids. I would probably say PG-13 just once you get to the particular enemy, the gimps at the end.
Yeah.
They drove me nuts too.
They probably see weirder stuff.
Well, yeah, they drove me nuts because you try to use the belt of justice to stun an enemy, and they will teleport in front of it to take the whip, which is concerning. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm puritanical about it or anything, but it was so frustrating especially when you're trying to like hit an enemy that's actually can do some damage to you, and then this little latex wearing freak shows up and feels some feelings about it. But yeah, that's
no, that's true. Especially when you have to like charge up the thing and you're. I hear that. But yeah, so this is a thing I guess we've been doing so lately with the pod. Way game or way lame?
Oh, way game. Definitely way game.
Yeah,
I think what was it, $20 when it's not on sale on Steam. I think that's totally worth it. And, I don't know I don't know how people feel about the value proposition these days, because it's like, you can do something like pay $30 for Factorio and waste 1,000 hours of your life on that. Well, not waste, but you know what I mean. But with something like this, I do think you said it earlier that this game knows when it's basically done what it can do, and I think it wraps it up at a good place. My playtime was exactly 6.5 hours, by the way, which is I think what the estimated time to beat was for this title. So dead on.
Yeah, exactly. I think also like it does, because again it does such a good job of like the Sega Sunny Skies vibe to it. Like it's just like it does something unique, even if the boomer shooter aspect isn't that unique, the mechanics are that unique, or even the sense of humor is that unique. Just playing a game that will engage with this color palette, to me, was worth it, just because I was like, oh man, this is color on a screen. Like we have all these screens that can do all kinds of crap nowadays, and it's just like no one wants to use color at all, and this was just really refreshing. Like that. I mean that's a big reason. I mean, I suspect that's a big part of like why a lot of those games that started off, they were like arcade games, like Crazy Taxi or whatever. Like, you need to grab someone's eye from across the room full of lights.
A track mode and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like this has that kind of coloration. Like I just wanted to look at everything, and that was really nice.
Yeah. Well, I will also say, like, I love the art in this game. Your character portraits are like full, between missions when they're talking. It's they're just fun character designs to look at, even if they are fashion police. And all the secrets being various horrifying fashion crimes. Someone putting up posters of your main character in various outfits. That was fun. I don't know what happens. I wonder if you find all of them, something occurs, but that might be something to explore at some point, or just Google it and see who's put it on YouTube. So,
I mean, and you mentioned like Supergiant. Like there is, like I don't want to say this. There is like a post Hades influence to the character design, I feel, in this game.
Oh, you mean that they're much like the Greek gods of Hades? They're just incredibly sexy characters. They
Exactly.
are very fashionable and attractive. Yeah.
No, it's not a trend I'm complaining about at all.
Yeah, no, I like it's interesting because I know that I'd seen something about Hades where they were like, yeah, they're Greek gods, they have to be attractive. And in this game, they are high fashionable people. They'll have to be ripped models basically, even if
Yeah.
they are fully covered up. And yeah, it's fun. I think everything about this game really comes together very
Mm.
well. It knows what aesthetic it's aiming for. It hits it. I think I need to play it with someone who knows more about fashion so they can point out
Yeah.
some of the things that maybe I missed. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is like one last thing I will say. Like one thing I always worry about with there's so much like classism that goes into fashion because like all this stuff is not crap anyone can afford really. It's all
Right.
unaffordable. What's the word I'm looking for? Conspicuous consumption.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But like this game, like there are moments where it could have gotten much more like judgy about like poor people clothes, and it doesn't really take those. It doesn't take those low balls. It kind of
Yeah.
keeps it pretty above the waist. Like it doesn't. It's not interested in punching down on ugly people. Like there's
Yeah.
like this game being made like 15 years ago could have been a much more concerning prospect.
Yeah, I can immediately imagine some things that would be very easy, low-hanging fruit to nail. And thankfully this didn't. I think closest you come is like, again, the Karen enemies with the
Potato sacks.
literally wearing
Like,
potato sacks.
Yeah, I feel like they could have maybe took another pass at that interpretation, but yeah.
Yeah. I also, I found it interesting. Something I noticed, when you get to the final boss area before the fight starts, there are various designs in that area, and I did notice that there's one that looks like it was probably an unused design for like a the character who's wearing the Crocs and the Speedo. I think that there was a possibly unused design for a female equivalent of that character. But yeah. I also have to say that when I look up Gucci belt, they're $420, and that is the weed number, but also, oh my god, it's just a lot of money.
Yeah. And also, I think, it is interesting that they generally, like, most of the enemy types are male or masculine at least. Like, they're not really interested
And business class, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean,
it's usually
there's the vape
like
guy with
tech
sagging
bros and
pants.
yuppies and stuff. Yeah.
But
Yeah. There's definitely a class of person they're trying to make fun of, which I'm fair. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
So, for the next bit, normally I like to do like a bit of a news segment, but I don't really want to do that because I don't know when this episode's going to come out, and I didn't really want to subject you to a quiz because that seems mean to do.
Oh, I would have taken it.
Okay, well maybe I could still do that.
Okay.
So, have you ever heard of the Proust questionnaire?
This what is this about? It doesn't sound familiar.
So this is a Marcel Proust, the writer. He had this thing where it's basically like the foundation of all those dating quizzes you find in magazines.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But I thought I would go through this, but I'm going to kind of alter some of the questions to be more video game related.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of some of these will be a bit more like insightful than others, and I'm not going to do the full thing. But I thought I could just ask you some of these. Maybe some of these won't be video game related. We'll see.
Okay.
So you're new to the pod, and most of the
true.
people who have played this, we've been doing this for almost over a year now, I think. So people have had a good while to know my opinions and my co-host opinions. But but not you because you're new.
That's
so
true.
Is there a favorite video game genre that you gravitate towards? Are there any, or if that's too prosaic a question, is there a genre that you think goes underrepresented on this podcast?
Well, I think I'll probably answer the first question. I mean, and I don't know if I can qualify it necessarily as a genre, but just anything that tends to be very story focused. And I don't mean in like a visual novel kind of way or like an interactive novel, but I mean, you know my thoughts about some of my favorite games recently, namely the Alan Wake series, Control, all of those, where the story is served a lot by the gameplay. That tends to be what I gravitate towards. And also drive car fast into wall. So there's the duality of man.
All right, that's fair. Is there a game that bridges those two things?
Oh God, there probably is, but right now I can't really think of too much of it, or I can't really think of one. Too much of it is not even a sentence. I, I I don't know. I mean, can you think of one that would bridge those two gaps? I
Not
feel like there were
really.
some titles that tried, like in the late 360 era. I'm thinking of stuff that like kind of went along with like the Borderlands sort of aesthetic. I can't like names aren't coming to me right now, but yeah, there's not a whole lot that really melds those two, and that might even just be because uh, it's difficult to serve a complex story with Crash Car and the Wall Go Fast. So
No, that's true. That's true. I mean, the only thing I think of is like maybe the Mad Max open world game that came out a while ago. A while ago.
yeah, I did play that. I enjoyed that game, although that one it felt more along the lines of a AAA game for better and for
Yeah,
worse.
yeah,
Um,
it's true.
not particularly groundbreaking. It was a lot of fun, but the story in that one was, I mean, the story of Mad Max is that the cars do go fast, and there isn't a lot of gas, but there's some guys have the gas, and you got to kill for it. So
Yeah,
that
that's true.
that usually is what underpins the whole genre.
Is there a favorite? Do you have there are a lot of like games within games you encounter, like you always have like lockpick games or like your standard like pipe dream kind of things for hacking mini games.
Hmm.
Is there a mini game format that you like especially that doesn't bring tears to your eyes, or at least?
That's like bad tears to my eyes. Is that
Yeah,
the?
yeah, exactly.
Oh man, I'm trying to think about what I've played, relatively recently with mini games. It's funny you mentioned game within game, and I'm thinking obviously most recently with this game we played this week, um,
Hmm.
the second boss having again I don't want to spoil any of it, but basically putting an entire second game in there. I don't know. Let me think about this. I'm figuring we can probably cut some of this down.
No, yeah, absolutely, no
Um,
worries. Sorry to
no,
spring this
no,
on you.
it's funny. Well, it feels a little bit like a job interview.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what these questions all sound like, job interview questions. I'm trying to make them seem less dry, frankly. I mean, Marcel Proust could write novels, but apparently these questions are kind of lame.
I'm looking through some of the stuff that I played recently. There hasn't been a lot that's really had. I don't
Mini
know if I played
games.
too many with like mini games that are like, especially like clearly defined or like not just like a one-off like
Hmm.
with Fashion Police Squad or like like the fishing mini game in the Hades series and
Yeah,
um,
I
yeah.
mean, fishing mini games could be a whole podcast just to itself.
Yeah, well, I know it's been a quiz before, so don't forget that if you try
Oh,
to
yeah,
ask it again, because I think you went through
yeah,
that.
that's true. Good call. Good call.
But yeah, it's that might be one of those things where it also, do you feel that the industry in general is kind of moving away from these, or am I just not playing games that have these sorts of mini games in it? Because it to me it almost feels like
Mm,
um, an older design choice, like mini
yeah,
maps that are on games that aren't necessarily served by them.
yeah. I think there is just generally like you tend to have much more like mash A kind of things that back in the day would have been like a quick lockpick puzzle or something like that. And
Hmm.
people said they complained about having to do too many lockpick puzzles. So instead of trying to innovate, they just removed them and turned it into a mash button thing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm still one of those people that every time I'm playing Fallout and I get to like a computer terminal, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta
Well,
do this
that's
stupid
you
mini
know what
game.
that honestly, I think that is one of the most fun because of all the little tricks.
Hmm.
Like oh, if you select the left caret and right caret on the same line, it will wipe out some of the passwords or reset your attempts. Actually, that I really did enjoy. Now that you mention it, and I still do. That one I don't. Lock picking is probably eye watering in the bad way. Um, doesn't bring me tears of joy. It's like I'm just like, oh, okay, well, let's see. All right, I'm breaking it. Okay, well, I need to be over by a degree. But mentioning the hacking years ago, when I was much younger, there was that. I think it was it was that the Matrix game that had come out where you play as two characters, one
Path
of
of
whom
Neo
has
or whatever.
no, I don't
Oh,
think
the
that
other
was
one.
it. It was God, it's really old now. But you play as two characters, one of which is like a middle-aged guy with white hair, and I think there's a woman that you play as well. But it
Mm.
had a hacking game in it, and it was basically like you would just be at a command prompt and have to figure out what to do. And this is the era of Brady games and various other strategy guides. But I remember figuring out probably through looking it up online over dial-up the various things to get in there, and it would unlock various things for the actual career mode. And I really enjoyed that because that was it was kind of an immersive sort of thing. It fit with the genre
Right.
of the movie and the game. And it had meaningful impact, and it made you feel pretty cool, especially when you're a kid who hasn't gone back and played it because Don't Meet Your Heroes. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't seem perfunctory. It felt necessary.
yeah, what is that game? Let me see if I
Um,
can find it. Just to
yeah, no worries. You mentioned Supergiant, and well, we've mentioned Supergiant a few times. Is what would you say your favorite like video game developers are, and what would you say makes a good video game developer? Like what qualities does a developer have that draws you toward them, that makes you want to like play their next game and that sort of thing?
yeah. Well, just as an aside, the game was Enter the Matrix. Came out in
Enter the
2003,
Matrix.
so it's
Okay.
old enough to drink now. So at least in the United States, and smoke because that's also 21 years old now here.
Okay.
So with what we talked about, and I think I sometimes have a short memory of some of these things, and that's just because my brain is turning to soup and or concrete soup perhaps. With Supergiant, it's just that there's a lot of love put into the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and that's a nebulous concept, but you don't feel like there was anything that was necessarily designed by committee. They weren't trying to specifically make this a profitable enterprise, or obviously that's part of it because they're a company and they have to make money to continue to survive. But where there could be cost cutting, they've realized that there is value in adding extra content, and not extra content, but stuff that really makes the game feel whole. And it really, because to me, something that I always kind of struggle with is like playing a Grand Theft Auto, and you've completed the story and the world is dead. It is a
Yeah.
dead world that you live in. If you might have a couple side missions left, maybe, but usually, if you're like me, you probably wrap those up right before the final mission,
Yeah.
because either you needed the advantage or wanted the advantage, or you were just like, that from past experience, once you finish that last mission, you now live in a dead world that has some cars that drive around it. So with something like Supergiant, where Hades and Transistor, Transistor was the game that first got me into Supergiant,
Yeah.
where you complete that game and there is still more to do. The story is served, like the gameplay, you playing it again and through, that serves the story, and it there's continued interest and there's continued development, and they put the time into making sure that the player still has something to do and explore. That's, I think, one of the critical things. And I think about Remedy.
Mm-hmm.
With them, mainly it's been, as I mentioned, the Alan Wake franchise. Control. Control I absolutely fell in love with, and that's really what kind of sparked my interest in Alan Wake. That it's very much a similar thing, where the world of Control, it does have a little bit of the GTA effect once you've beaten the game, but at the same time, it still has a very fleshed out. The world in there is very fleshed out, and I do want to play it again, and want to experience all those things again. Where I contrast that with something like Grand Theft Auto, where once I beat it, I need to forget that I've played the game before I will play it again.
Right.
Like it needs
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
6 or 7 years, which, given the time
Release.
between release with Rockstar and the way that my mind's going, I could probably replay GTA 5 several times now, although I haven't.
Yeah. No, exactly.
I'm gonna flip it on you though. I'm curious about your response to this question.
I mean, like, I guess I'm in a similar boat with the like. I mean, Supergiant's obviously like a developer that I have a great deal of confidence in. I've always liked. They've always every time they've approached a game genre, it always feels like they are making the best version of that game that can conceivably kind of be figured out. But I think, like, if I were to say, like, a lot of my heroes are dead. That's kind of my problem.
That's
like,
fair. Yeah.
I kind of think about, like, Square in the '90s, or Paradox up until about 10 years ago, where like they just kind of. I think, like, I appreciate experimentation in games. Well, rather, I mean, not that, but not so much as to alienate me, because I'm still basic. But, like,
sure.
I liked how like in the in the '90s, Square had tons of money that they're pouring into RPGs, but they were still they were like, well, we know we're going to sell this, so instead of playing it safe, we're going to do weird stuff with the mechanics, tell really weird stories, go with art styles that aren't normal or seen before. And then with Paradox, it's a very different thing, but they were like, well, we're just going to get really good at doing one thing and double down on that. Nowadays, neither of them really do that, but I guess I like consistency and identity with the studio. I mean, I guess I could even say that about Ubisoft, because I mean, they're consistent and they have an identity. It's just not always amazing, but, like, I appreciate that from Ubisoft. I'm like, okay, you tried. I'm not paying that for that, but I'll play it in a few years.
Yeah, it's funny that you just mentioned not paying that for that, because I just was looking on Steam, and it's like, it seems like the AAA price has now gone up to roughly $80 on some of the new release titles, and it's one of those things where I can feel myself aging actively when I'm just we're never ignoring the fact that everything in the world constantly gets more expensive, just because that's how our economic system is designed. But
well, also, I feel like there's more alternatives to it too. Like, it's not just that these things cost more; it's just that, like, it feels like you're not necessarily getting a good enough product, because you can pay less for, like you say, a Factorio or a Supergiant game that is going to provide just as much, if not more, entertainment than a AAA game is going to. Yeah. So it feels like it's not just you're paying more; it's like it feels you're paying more for less.
Yeah, I know it's something that I've heard. You've discussed it previously, of not trying to assign a value of, this game costs this much and you get X amount of hours over it. So, and I think it's very difficult for people not to sometimes do that calculus. Well, that algebra of divide price by hours to determine, was this worth it. But there's obviously a lot of other factors, quality of the game and how much you personally get out of it. But yeah, I guess that's a very difficult thing, and you're right, especially when you can get like an indie title or something that is smaller and maybe can do what it does very, very well, and then you see something that costs nearly, at this point, you round up, it's nearly $100. It can be kind of hard to get over, effectively that sticker shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, one thing I've thought about it a lot is, like, the way, like, Hollywood was in the '60s, where they kept making bigger and bigger budget films, but, like, people started balking at those things and, like, the higher ticket prices, because they could just go home and catch the movie from a couple years ago on the late night thing, or just watch television. Yeah. And they've always felt like they had to spend more money on bigger products to get more people into the theater, because they weren't going to go in the theater unless it was a big deal. I mean, not like that sounds familiar at all nowadays, but and then they almost ran themselves under by the end of the '60s. So I kind of feel like that's kind of the way. I don't know, maybe that's just the boom bust nature of capitalism or whatever. But it feels like people are. It's not like a. I mean, entertainment time is entertainment time. People are going to do other things too. Like, video games have to compete with television. They have to compete with film. They have to compete with books. They have to compete with comic books. They have to compete with
and live entertainment. I mean, it's
friends.
still like
that too.
Free things too. Well, here we're making sure that third spaces cost money. So that's that way we can assign value to it, so people are more likely to know.
Yeah.
I'll
but I mean, it's I mean, all the more hooray for indie games.
Yeah, absolutely. I do you want to continue with this line of questioning, or you want to spin for a little bit?
I don't know. I'm fine with that. I mean, I mostly just wanted to keep the combo going. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll save some of these questions maybe next time you're on here. So I
Okay.
don't have to
Yeah. Well,
stress
I
it.
was, we talk about, we mentioned Factorio, and I think on the 21st of October, I believe is the release date for Space
Mm-hmm.
Age / Factorio 2.0. And I cannot tell you how much I'm going to disappear as a human being when that comes out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be present on this earth. So I
Yeah.
am so excited.
It was a big problem when I got a laptop that could run Factorio because I ruined my neck for like a week.
Yeah, just
Sitting there,
leaning
like...
forward and
Exactly.
is posture something to be concerned about now as a human? Yes, yes, you do. Oh no.
Yeah,
I'm also impressed with how optimized that game is, just in general.
oh, it's absolutely. It's like one of those ones with like it's like up there with like Roller Coaster Tycoon
Mm-hmm.
as just
Yeah.
kind of like how did they manage to do this with this like is it like I don't think it doesn't it is its own engine or is it
I don't know the details of the engine. I know that, or I say
yeah.
that I know that based on some comments from the developer on Reddit. Most of it's C++ as far as the actual language that they're
Yeah.
programming
Yeah.
it in. And I don't know if so. Every Friday, I'm thrilled because this last year and change, at least, they've been releasing Factorio Facts Friday, where
Yeah.
they just discuss the development, and it's incredible that there are still massive improvements to be made as far as optimizing the game, and they've posted these, and it's I'm not a programmer by trade. I know a little bit, and it's just very impressive to see, and they do a good job of explaining it. Just these visualizations of how it's like, hey, this was inefficient because the legs needed to check every frame like 50 squares to see where they needed to land.
Right.
So we did this optimization, and now we cut it down to like a picosecond or something. I'm just like, that's incredible.
Yeah, no, not to rewind too much, but that's another thing that I think I really appreciate with a developer. Like Paradox used to be really good about communicating the development process and the bug fixing process and everything
Yeah.
with the fan base, and that's not something they really bother with. But I do appreciate developers who are open about that a lot, like willing to take the time to like write up something to explain what they're working on.
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
it's nothing to. I mean, I think nowadays, especially because developers are probably reluctant to do that a lot because it opens you up to so much criticism. But I think that's
Oh yeah. Say
still
say
something
the
I
wrong
appreciate.
thing. Say the wrong thing in a post about it, and all of a sudden people are, they've inferred that this is going to be a feature or something, and
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very easy to whip people up into a frenzy, or for people to whip themselves up into a frenzy. But yeah, no, I definitely, it's interesting to compare and contrast that with. I still haven't picked up City Skylines 2. I'm thinking about it. It's getting to a point where I may pick it up, but how they kind of were like, oh well, we're going to do Dev Diaries again when they started to have a little bit of a fiasco post launch, and then they were like, we are not going to do Dev. I feel bad for everyone involved with that, especially from the developer and publisher side. Or, well, developer side especially. Publisher, it's okay, but it's they're human beings that they got a lot of hate, but also it's very hard to react to some of the situations in a way that people will, even if you're doing it constructively. I think there was a lot of. I guess just to say, I feel bad for Colossal Order, and I hope that all the employees there are doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, this was not a thing they had a lot of control over. Like when it came to the I mean, the game released in an unfinished state, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't know to what extent we should blame Colossal Order for it. But I mean, like I said, I've been playing it a lot, and I think it's about in the state that the first one was when it launched. Like as far as like, still got some jank, but it's got a lot there. It's definitely worth playing now.
And the first one had the advantage of it was not SimCity. What was the
Just SimCity
SimCity?
20.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
EA, by the way, they really need to stop. They really need to have stopped ever doing that, because like how many Need for Speed have come out? Like there was Need for Speed, and then Need for Speed, and then I think there was Need for Speed, and there was Need for Speed Most Wanted, and then Need for Speed Most Wanted came out.
Yeah, no, I know. It's like the Call of Duty thing.
Oh my
where
god.
I can't even follow what we're on at this point.
Yeah.
It's just they should just do it like sports titles and just say the year afterwards.
Call of Duty 2024.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be hilarious. Yeah, no, they should. They should, honestly. FIFA. They'll just gun 2024.
Yeah, exactly. So, have you been playing anything besides Fashion Police Squad?
We're doing. What have you been playing this week, or what are you playing
Yeah,
this week?
I mean, unless you got something else.
No, no,
let's go.
I've been playing BeamNG,
Okay.
BeamNG.drive. It's its full Christian name, and I
This
you
is
know I
the very in-depth car simulator with the
yeah,
real
soft
crash
body
physics and
physics,
everything.
and yeah,
Mhm.
all the vehicles are constructed of components that are actually like the components. So if like you crash into a wall and your engine comes flying out of the car, well your car doesn't have an engine anymore, so it won't go. But you can break drive shafts. You can like individual body parts can fall off. It's everything that the guy at GameStop when Burnout Revenge came out told me that Burnout Revenge was going to be, which still has a that is a very fond place in my heart. But obviously, the they did a great job with the damage sim in that game, but it was not anything like this. It's
Mhm.
still rigid body physics. But no, they've released an update for BeamNG.drive just over the last couple months. I think they usually do like 4 quote unquote major updates a year, where they increment the minor version. But they've, I bought the game initially because I was like, oh, this is so cool. I can drive watch vehicles tear themselves apart. But there's a career mode in it. So recently I've
There's a
been,
career mode now.
so it's a work in progress and they hide it from you.
Okay, because I
Um,
haven't played it in like 6, 7 years, maybe.
oh yeah,
It's been a
yeah.
long time.
You should if you well, I mean, for one, my rig is not the newest at this point. My
Mm.
processor, it's a 7600K. It's an i5 7600K, so that is now a 7-year-old processor. Um, and it's still playable, but no. So
Hmm.
there's a career mode. They hide it from you. They gray it out, but if you click on it, it does give you a warning that says, "Hey, this is extremely work in progress. Your save files might get deleted or whatever after an update." So you can access it. I didn't even know it was like I just assumed because it was
Hmm.
grayed out, you couldn't even click on it because it says coming
Right.
soon. I'm like, oh, okay, but no, and it was conflicting with my time playing this game, Fashion Police Squad, because I got sucked in so hard.
Right.
Because it's everything I think I've ever wanted, where you can customize every little thing of your car and drive around, and you like. I loaded up some sort of amalgamation between a Mercedes and a BMW from the 80s. So,
Hmm.
that was my starter car. Very good. You load it up with a bunch of boxes and you just run around town delivering stuff and you level up. And then you can start delivering like you can drive people's cars around like for deliveries for them, and then now I'm delivering trailers, and it's so funny because I'm doing this game an incredible soft body physics simulation, realistic deformation of everything. You can rip parts off, and I'm like, well, I got to drive my box truck now. I got to drive it. It's like lame crazy taxi, where I'm just like schlepping a U-Haul around town at 50 miles an hour and trying not to run over a curb and blow out the suspension because I've got half a ton in the back. So it sucked me in once I realized I could do career mode, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's so be aware, anyone who has that same kind of like, if you've gotten into Factorio and then come out at 5 in the morning because you lost track of time, the very same thing can happen with this. So
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, that's. I haven't really. I mean, I played it a lot. Like I said, when it. I don't know if it was an early
mhm.
access. I
It's
mean, is
still
it
early
still in early
access.
access? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's
what I
still
thought.
it's version 0.33.3, I think, right
Okay,
now.
so we still got another 7, 8 years at least.
Well, yeah.
So I mean, I played. Yeah, it must have been. It must have been like 2017. I played it. I think maybe
Hmm.
2016 if it's that old.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like load up a thing. They didn't even have that many cars. You had to like download other people's cars,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
then you
they've
just
they've a
smash them into things.
they have a ton in it, and they have all sorts of different configurations. And the stuff that I really go feral for is like, we've updated the semi truck chassis with a cab over and also twin steer, and I'm like, twin steer. Like it's I'm losing my mind
Yeah,
over those sorts of things. But yeah, it's definitely worth, if you haven't played it in that long, you should definitely boot it up. Um,
yeah,
and also, I don't know, were you ever familiar with the game Automation? It's like basically like car tycoon essentially.
yeah. Where you have to like design the car, and then
Yes.
I don't. I don't know if I played it. I think I may have
Okay.
even watched you play it way back in the day.
That's another one's been in early access for like half of my life.
Yeah.
So, well, that one a while ago now they set it up so that you can, when you design a car in automation, you can export it to BeamNG and drive it.
That's
So
cool.
I made like a like a first generation Chrysler minivan with a tow hitch and a V6, and that's what I was driving around. The very it's like, no, I don't want to drive the Bugatti Veyron or whatever, a Ferrari. No, I want to drive a turbo 4-cylinder minivan and tow a trailer full
Exactly.
of wood. So
So how you've been playing My Summer Car then, I guess?
I haven't. That's one I need to pick up. Um, I've watched. There's various YouTubers who I watch who will play some of these games, and
Mm,
I think there's another one that's called like the Long Drive, if I recall.
yeah. Hmm.
That also is kind of speaking to me. Although I think before I get into that, I might pick up um, Pacific Drive, another title
Yeah.
with Drive in it. BeamNG Drive, the Long Drive, Pacific Drive. I think I'm establishing a
Hmm.
pattern here.
Yeah.
But
Maximum Overdrive
yeah, starring Stephen King as the writer.
as
Man.
Cocaine Man.
So, but yeah, that's what I've been playing, and those are my recommendations with that. Just watch out for Time Suck. What have you been playing this week?
So I've been there's this little puzzle game. I'm a real big fan of like Pitcross and like the nonogram kind of puzzle games.
Okay.
And there's a 3D one on Steam called VOXELGRAM, which I played a lot of a few years ago, but they actually put out DLC out of nowhere with a bunch of more puzzles, and actually you can download like user created puzzles and stuff, and it's all just math shapes, so it's not really that hard to make content for, I assume. But
Yeah.
that's another game that I can. It's I don't know. It's just it sucks me in.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just again they're just logical math puzzles, like the kind of stuff you waste time on your phone. But I don't know. By giving me a 3D model, I have to spin around while I do this. Just makes
Yeah.
me feel all the more.
Oh yeah, you can mentally rotate. That's it's all about mental rotation, baby. That's
No, but there's something also about it that makes me just this will sound very egotistical, but like I feel like a smart guy when I play it.
uh-huh.
Like there's something about it that makes me feel like I'm like it's like an episode of Star Trek, and I'm like it's like, yes, Wesley, this is Vulcan spinny math puzzle, and you have to only 3 people have mastered it in the universe. And it's like some stupid bad CGI
Yeah.
shape thing that he's messing around with on a table. It's just it's like, oh yeah.
I
Look
will
how
say
cool I am.
I'm looking it up, and this does look immediately, the art style is something that looks attractive to me. Like that I might say. I mean, that looks like it's pretty inexpensive too, so I might have to take a look at that. That reminds me. I also, not this week, but in the last couple weeks, I started playing Shapes 2. Which
Oh yeah.
I refer to as my enrichment game because it really just sounds like, like here's the plastic keys for your toddler, Shapes 2. But
Yeah.
that one also, it very much has a similar, like, Factorio, say goodbye to your free time, you fool.
Yeah.
And I really started to. That one's another one where it's like I could feel myself leaning in and putting my shoulders back, and then wondering why my neck is very stiff. So,
Yeah. No, this month's gonna be terrible because I mean, the new Dragon Age comes out at the end of the month, and then I'm
oh,
this close to buying Metaphor Refantasio, which
oh,
I know will eat my life, which is the Persona-like game.
hmm
It's just Persona, but with dragons, basically, as far as I can tell, which sounds good to me.
okay,
So
yeah,
there's a lot of things asking for my time right now.
yeah. Yeah, I am going to have to look into. I'm going to look into VOXELGRAM. That, and it looks like it's it's cheap. Just pick it up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Yeah, yeah, I know. It's like the I don't even know what cohort we can ascribe that to of the. It's well.
Yeah, the wrapping up noise.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
The middle millennial wrapping up noise. Are we elder millennials? No, we're not elder millennials.
No, although I think there's some younger Gen Zs that have decided that they're elder millennials in my lifetime. I think that there was some switch over that happened at some point, but
I think that's reasonable. I have a friend who's like as old as this millennium is, and he kind of feels like a young millennial more than a Gen Z. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, it's these things are nebulous at best.
It's fluid, man.
Well, that too. But yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for being here. Hopefully, we'll have you on again soon.
Sure. Yeah. No. This is good.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, and leave a comment or whatever.
Yeah, leave a comment on Spotify.
Podcast.
Get on Spotify and leave comments. You can do that there, right?
I mean, maybe. I don't know anymore. Bye.
Bye.
We usually bullshit for a while, and then I kind of find a good spot where things make sense to edit it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I get that.
Don't feel like we have to be like, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.